Officer Michael Rodriguez had seen many strange things during his 15 years on the force, but nothing quite prepared him for the call that came in on that humid Tuesday afternoon. A concerned citizen had reported two young women attempting to sell a service dog outside the downtown shopping center. The caller claimed the women looked suspicious and seemed to be scamming innocent people. As Michael drove toward the location, he felt his jaw tighten with anger. Service dog fraud was something that particularly bothered him. These specially trained animals were lifelines for people with disabilities, and anyone trying to profit from fake service dogs made his blood boil. He had arrested several people over the years for this exact crime, and each case left him feeling disgusted by human greed. When he arrived at the shopping center, he immediately spotted them. Two identical young women, probably in their early 20s, stood near the entrance with a beautiful golden retriever wearing a red service vest. They were holding a handwritten sign that read, "Service dog, $500. Several people had gathered around them, some looking interested while others appeared confused. The twins were strikingly similar, with long brown hair and worried expressions on their faces. The dog sat calmly between them, showing the disciplined behavior typical of a well-trained service animal. This only made Michael more suspicious. If they had a real service dog, why would they be trying to sell it? He parked his patrol car and approached the small crowd. The moment people saw his uniform, they quickly dispersed, leaving just the two women and their dog. The sisters looked at each other nervously, clearly recognizing they were in trouble. "Good afternoon, ladies," Michael said, keeping his voice professional but stern. "I'm Officer Rodriguez. I received a report about you trying to sell a service dog. Is this true?" The twin on the left, who seemed slightly more confident, stepped forward. "Yes, officer, but we can explain everything. This isn't what it looks like." Michael raised his hand to stop her.
"Ma'am, selling service dogs without proper authorization is illegal."
"These animals are protected under federal law, and what you're doing could be considered fraud." The other twin started crying softly, which only reinforced Michael's belief that they were guilty of something. In his experience, criminals often tried to use tears to gain sympathy. He had seen this tactic countless times before. "I need to see some identification from both of you," he continued, pulling out his notepad. "And I'll need to see the documentation for this animal." The crying twin reached into her purse with shaking hands while her sister tried to comfort her. "Please, officer, just let us explain what's happening. We're not criminals. We would never hurt anyone." Michael studied their faces carefully. Despite their distress, something about their demeanor seemed genuine. They didn't have the hardened look of typical scammers he had encountered. Still, he had learned not to trust appearances. Some of the most convincing criminals he had arrested had seemed like innocent victims at first glance. The golden retriever remained perfectly still throughout the encounter, showing remarkable training and discipline. Its behavior was so professional that Michael began to wonder if this might actually be a legitimate service animal. But if it was real, why were they trying to sell it? As the first twin handed him her driver's license, Michael noticed her hands were trembling. Her sister continued to cry quietly, occasionally reaching down to pet the dog, who seemed to provide her with comfort. "The documentation is at home," the first twin said quietly. "We didn't think to bring it with us today. We never planned for this to happen." Michael's suspicion grew stronger. "You didn't plan to sell the dog? Then why are you here with a sign asking for money?" The twins exchanged another worried glance, and Michael could see they were silently communicating in the way that only siblings could. Whatever they were hiding, they were clearly in it together. "Officer, our names are Sarah and Emma Chen," the first twin said, "and we desperately need your help, not your arrest. This dog belongs to our younger brother, and something terrible has happened to our family." The mention of a younger brother caught Michael's attention. His own protective instincts as an older sibling kicked in, though he tried to maintain his professional skepticism. He had learned that criminals often used family stories to manipulate law enforcement. "What kind of terrible thing?" he asked, still keeping his notepad ready. Sarah looked at Emma, who nodded through her tears. "Our brother Danny is in the hospital. He's been there for 3 weeks now, and the doctors don't know if he's going to make it. We're trying to raise money for his medical bills, and this dog is the only valuable thing our family owns." Michael felt a small crack in his armor of suspicion, but he wasn't ready to believe them yet. Medical emergencies were another common story used by con artists. If your brother needs this service dog, why would you sell it? Doesn't he require it for his disability? The question seemed to hit both sisters like a physical blow. Emma's crying intensified, and Sarah's confident facade finally crumbled. "That's just it, officer. Danny might never need Buddy again. The doctors think he might never wake up." The weight of Sarah's words hung in the air like a thick fog. Michael felt his stern expression soften slightly, though he fought to maintain his professional composure. He had heard many sob stories over the years, but something in the way Emma collapsed against her sister suggested this wasn't an act. "Tell me about your brother," Michael said, his voice gentler than before. He noticed how Buddy, the golden retriever, immediately moved closer to Emma when she started crying harder. The dog's response seemed automatic and trained, exactly what you would expect from a real service animal. Sarah wrapped her arm around her twin sister before continuing. "Danny is 16 years old. He has severe epilepsy and autism. Buddy has been his service dog for 3 years now. The dog can detect when Danny is about to have a seizure and alerts us so we can help him." Michael nodded, familiar with seizure alert dogs from his training. These animals could indeed save lives by providing early warnings. "How did your brother end up in the hospital?" 3 weeks ago, Danny had a massive seizure while we were at the park," Sarah explained, her voice breaking. "It was different from his usual ones. Buddy tried to warn us, but it happened so fast. Danny fell and hit his head on the concrete. He's been in a coma ever since." Emma finally found her voice through her tears. "The doctors say there's brain damage. They don't know how much or if he'll ever wake up. Even if he does, they think he might not be the same Danny we know." Michael felt his heart sink. As a police officer, he had responded to countless medical emergencies involving children. Each one affected him deeply, especially cases involving brain injuries. "I'm sorry to hear about your brother, but I still don't understand why you're trying to sell his service dog." Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "These are the medical bills from just the first week. We've gotten more since then." Michael looked at the hospital invoice and felt his breath catch. The amount was staggering, over $40,000 for 7 days of intensive care. He could only imagine how much the total would be after 3 weeks. "Our parents don't have insurance that covers everything," Emma said quietly. "Mom works 2 jobs and Dad drives a delivery truck. They're good people, but they're not rich. They've already taken out loans against the house. The hospital is threatening to transfer Danny to a different facility if we can't pay," Sarah added. "A place with less advanced equipment. The doctors say that could hurt his chances of recovery." Michael studied the invoice more carefully. It looked legitimate, complete with official letterheads and detailed medical codes. It would be extremely difficult to fake something this sophisticated. "Why don't your parents know you're trying to sell the dog?" The twins looked at each other again, and Michael could see they were ashamed. "They would never allow it," Sarah admitted. "They love Buddy almost as much as Danny does. But they're so focused on Danny right now, they're not thinking clearly about money. We thought if we could raise some money quickly, we could help without them knowing," Emma said. "Then maybe we could figure out a way to get Buddy back later after Danny recovers." Michael felt torn between his duty as a police officer and his growing sympathy for the sisters. Their story was becoming more believable with each detail, but he still needed to verify everything. "Do you have any proof that your brother is in the hospital?" Sarah immediately pulled out her phone. "I have pictures of Danny with Buddy, and I can show you the hospital visitor logs. We've been there every day." She scrolled through her photos, showing Michael dozens of images of a young boy with a golden retriever. In every picture, the bond between Danny and Buddy was obvious. The dog was always close to the boy, often with its head resting on Danny's lap or chest. The photos clearly showed Buddy wearing his service vest in various locations. At home, in parks, at stores. "Here's one from the hospital yesterday," Sarah said, showing a heartbreaking image of Buddy lying on a hospital bed next to an unconscious boy surrounded by machines and tubes. Michael's professional skepticism was rapidly dissolving. The photos were clearly not staged, spanning what appeared to be several years. The progression of Danny growing older while Buddy remained his constant companion told a story that would be impossible to fake. "The hospital allows the dog to visit?" Michael asked. "Buddy is registered as Danny's service animal, so they have to allow it," Emma explained. "The doctors actually encourage it. They say sometimes service dogs can help coma patients respond." Michael looked down at Buddy, who was now sitting calmly between the sisters but keeping his attention focused on Emma, who was still emotional. The dog's behavior continued to impress him with its professionalism and training. "How much money are you trying to raise by selling Buddy?" he asked. "We hoped we could get enough for at least one more week at the current hospital," Sarah said. "Maybe $5,000? We know Buddy is worth more than that, but we're desperate." The number hit Michael hard. These young women were willing to sell their brother's lifeline for a fraction of its value, just to buy him a few more days of proper medical care. The sacrifice was both heartbreaking and admirable. Michael closed his notepad and looked at the two sisters with new eyes. What had started as a routine fraud investigation was becoming something entirely different. The genuine pain in their faces and the legitimate documentation they had shown him painted a picture of a family in crisis, not criminals trying to make easy money. "Ladies, I need to ask you to stop trying to sell the dog," he said carefully. "Not because I think you're criminals, but because there might be better ways to help your brother." Sarah and Emma looked confused and worried. "Are you going to arrest us?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, I'm not going to arrest you," Michael assured them. "But selling a service dog like this could get you into legal trouble, even with good intentions. Plus, you're not going to get nearly enough money this way to make a real difference in your brother's medical bills." The sisters looked relieved, but still uncertain. "Then what are we supposed to do?" Sarah asked. "We've tried everything we can think of. We've started online fundraisers, but they're not raising money fast enough. We've applied for charity programs, but the waiting lists are months long." Michael thought for a moment. During his years on the force, he had seen communities come together in amazing ways to help families in need. He had also learned about resources that many people didn't know existed. "Have you contacted the hospital's social worker about financial assistance programs?" "We tried, but they said our family makes too much money to qualify for most programs," Emma explained. "Dad's delivery job pays just enough to put us over the income limits, but not enough to actually pay these bills." This was a common problem Michael had encountered before. Many working families fell into a gap where they earned too much for assistance, but not enough to handle major emergencies. "What about the service dog organization that trained Buddy? Have you talked to them?" The twins shook their heads. "We were afraid they might try to take Buddy away if they knew we were thinking about selling him," Sarah admitted. Michael nodded understandingly. "I think you should call them. Most legitimate service dog organizations want to help their clients succeed. They might have resources or ideas you haven't considered." He pulled out his business card and wrote something on the back. "I'm also going to give you the contact information for a police officer I know who specializes in community outreach. Officer Jennifer Martinez has helped connect families with resources in situations like this." Emma took the card with shaking hands. "You really think there might be other options?" "I've seen communities do incredible things when they learn about families in need," Michael said. "But you need to be smart about how you ask for help. Trying to sell Buddy like this makes you look desperate, and unfortunately some people will try to take advantage of that." Sarah looked down at Buddy, who was still calmly sitting between them. "We are desperate. We just want our little brother to have the best chance possible." Michael felt a lump forming in his throat. The love these sisters had for their brother reminded him of his own relationship with his younger siblings. "I understand that. But desperation can lead to poor decisions that hurt more than they help." He knelt down and gently petted Buddy, who wagged his tail slightly, but remained focused on his duties. "This is an amazing dog. I can tell he's been trained by professionals. If Danny does wake up, he's going to need Buddy more than ever during his recovery." The weight of this statement seemed to hit both sisters simultaneously. They had been so focused on the immediate financial crisis that they hadn't fully considered what selling Buddy might mean for Danny's future. "We never thought about that," Emma said quietly. "We just knew we needed money now." Michael stood back up and looked at both women seriously. "I want to help you, but I need you to promise me something. Promise me you'll stop trying to sell Buddy today and that you'll contact the people I mentioned before you make any other big decisions." Both sisters nodded eagerly. "We promise," Sarah said. "But what if those options don't work? What if we run out of time?" "Then we'll figure out something else," Michael said with more confidence than he felt. "But let's exhaust all the proper channels first." He watched as the sisters gathered up their sign and prepared to leave. Despite everything they had told him, he realized he still needed to verify their story. It wasn't that he didn't believe them anymore, but his training demanded that he follow proper procedures. "One more thing," he said as they started to walk away. "I'd like to visit your brother in the hospital. if that's okay with you and your parents. I want to verify your story, but I also want to see if there's anything else I can do to help." The sisters' faces lit up with hope for the first time since he had approached them. "Really, you would do that?" Emma asked. "Yes, I would. Can you give me the hospital information and your parents' contact details?" As Sarah wrote down the information, Michael found himself thinking about his own family. He had always been protective of his younger siblings, and he could only imagine how these young women felt watching their brother fight for his life while feeling helpless to save him. "Officer Rodriguez," Sarah said as she handed him the paper, "thank you for listening to us instead of just arresting us. Most people would have assumed the worst." Michael smiled genuinely for the first time since the encounter began. "Most people aren't police officers. We're trained to get to the truth even when it's complicated." The next morning, Michael found himself standing outside the pediatric intensive care unit at City General Hospital. He had called ahead and spoken with Mr. and Mrs. Chen, who had been surprised but grateful that a police officer wanted to help their family. They had given him permission to visit Danny and had promised to meet him there. As Michael walked through the hospital corridors, he reflected on how much his perspective had changed in just 24 hours. Yesterday, he had been ready to arrest 2 young women for fraud. Today, he was volunteering his time to help a family he had never met before. He found the Chen family in the waiting area outside Danny's room. Mr. Chen was a small, tired-looking man in his 40s wearing a rumpled delivery uniform that suggested he had come straight from work. Mrs. Chen was a petite woman with kind eyes that were red from crying. She was holding a coffee cup with shaking hands. "Mr. and Mrs. Chen, I'm Officer Rodriguez," Michael said, approaching them carefully. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Mrs. Chen stood up immediately. "Officer, thank you so much for not arresting our daughters. They told us what happened yesterday. We had no idea they were trying to sell Buddy." "They're good girls," Mr. Chen added, his English accented but clear. "They just love their brother very much. Sometimes love makes people do crazy things," Michael nodded understandingly. "I could see how much they care about Danny. That's why I wanted to come here today. I'd like to help if I can." Mrs. Chen's eyes filled with fresh tears. "Would you like to meet Danny? The doctors say it's good for him to have visitors even though he can't respond." Michael followed the parents into Danny's room, and what he saw there made his heart break. The 16-year-old boy looked much younger than his age, lying still among a maze of medical equipment. Machines beeped and hummed around him, tracking his vital signs and helping him breathe. But what struck Michael most was Buddy. The golden retriever was lying on the hospital bed next to Danny, his head resting gently on the boy's chest. Even in this sterile, mechanical environment, the bond between the boy and his service dog was unmistakable. "Buddy hasn't left Danny's side since the accident," Mrs. Chen explained softly. "The nurses say he somehow knows when Danny's vital signs change. He gets restless right before the machines start beeping." Michael watched as Buddy lifted his head slightly when they entered the room, acknowledging their presence but never taking his full attention away from Danny. The dog's dedication was both beautiful and heartbreaking. "The doctors say Danny can probably hear us, even though he can't respond," Mr. Chen said, moving to his son's bedside. "We talk to him every day, telling him about what's happening at home, at school. Buddy listens to every word." Michael approached the bed slowly, not wanting to disturb the careful balance that seemed to exist between boy and dog. "How long have Danny and Buddy been together?" 3 years, Mrs. Chen replied. "Danny's seizures were getting worse when he was 13. Regular medications weren't working well, and we were afraid to let him do normal teenage things. Then we heard about seizure alert dogs. It took almost a year to get Buddy," Mr. Chen continued. "The training program was expensive and there was a long waiting list. But from the first day they met, it was like they were meant to be together." Michael could see evidence of that bond everywhere he looked. There were photos taped to the wall showing Danny and Buddy in various activities, at school, playing in the park, working on homework together. In every picture, Buddy was attentive and protective, always positioned where he could quickly respond if Danny needed help. "Your daughters told me they were trying to sell Buddy to help pay for Danny's medical care," Michael said gently. "Have you explored all the financial assistance options available?" Mrs. Chen sighed heavily. "We've tried everything we know about. Our insurance covers some of the basic care, but not the specialized treatments Danny needs. The social worker here has been helpful, But most programs have waiting lists or income requirements we don't meet. We make too much money for charity care, but not enough to pay these bills, Mr. Chen added bitterly. Sometimes I think we would be better off if I quit my job, but then we would have no income at all. This was exactly the situation Michael had suspected. Working families often found themselves trapped in a system that penalized them for trying to be self-sufficient. Have you contacted any local news stations? Sometimes media attention can help raise awareness and funds. The parents looked at each other uncertainly. We're very private people, Mrs. Chen explained. The idea of asking strangers for money feels wrong to us. We've always taken care of ourselves. Michael understood their reluctance. Pride was often the biggest obstacle to getting help, especially for families who had never needed assistance before. I respect that, but this isn't about pride anymore. It's about giving Danny every possible chance to recover. As if responding to his name, Danny's breathing pattern changed slightly, and Buddy immediately lifted his head, alerting to something the humans couldn't detect. A few seconds later, one of the monitors began beeping, and a nurse quickly entered the room. It's okay, the nurse said, checking the machines. Just a small change in his heart rate. Buddy always knows before we do. Michael watched in amazement as Buddy gently nuzzled Danny's hand with his nose, as if trying to comfort his young master even in unconsciousness. The dog's behavior was so precisely trained and deeply caring that it was impossible to imagine Danny recovering without him. Mrs. Chen, Michael said after the nurse left, I think I know someone who might be able to help. You get the word out about Danny's situation without making you feel like you're begging for charity. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts. There's a reporter I know who specializes in human interest stories. She's very respectful and focuses on celebrating community spirit rather than exploiting people's pain. Mrs. Chen looked at her husband, who nodded slowly. If you think it might help Danny, we're willing to try anything. 3 weeks later, Michael stood in the same hospital room, but everything had changed. The story of Danny, Buddy, and the Chen family had touched the hearts of thousands of people across the city and beyond. What started as a simple news segment had grown into a community-wide effort that restored Michael's faith in human kindness. The reporter Michael had contacted, Maria Santos, had indeed treated the family's story with respect and dignity. Her segment focused on the incredible bond between Danny and Buddy and how a loving family was fighting to keep hope alive during their darkest hour. She never sensationalized their financial struggles or made them appear desperate. The response had been immediate and overwhelming. Within hours of the story airing, the hospital had received dozens of calls from people wanting to help. Donations began pouring in, not just money but offers of meals, transportation, and emotional support. A local business owner had even offered Mr. Chen a better-paying job with health insurance that would cover more of Danny's care. But the most miraculous change was in Danny himself. 2 days after the story aired, he had opened his eyes for the first time since his accident. The doctors couldn't explain why, but they noted that Buddy had been unusually active that morning, pacing around the bed and whining, softly as if he sensed something the medical equipment couldn't detect. The neurologist thinks the media attention might have subconsciously motivated Danny, Mrs. Chen had told Michael when she called with the news. But I think Buddy just knew his boy was ready to wake up. Now, as Michael watched Danny slowly sip juice through a straw, while Buddy sat faithfully beside his wheelchair, he marveled at how much had changed. Danny still had a long recovery ahead of him, and the doctors warned that he might never be exactly the same as before his accident. But he was awake, alert, and slowly regaining his speech and motor skills. Officer Rodriguez, Danny said, his words still slightly slurred but clear enough to understand. Buddy told me you helped save him. Michael smiled, touched by the boy's simple faith in his dog's communication abilities. Buddy told you that, did he? He tells me lots of things, Danny said seriously, reaching down to stroke the golden retriever's head. He said you were scared when you first met Sarah and Emma, but then you listened with your heart instead of just your head. The insight from this recovering 16-year-old took Michael by surprise. Through his brain injury and medications, Danny seemed to have developed an even deeper understanding of the world around him. Your sisters were very brave that day. They love you very much. I know, Danny said simply. That's why I had to wake up. Buddy said they needed me to be okay. Sarah and Emma approached from across the room. where they had been talking with their parents and some of the volunteers who had become like extended family to the Chens. The twins looked healthier and happier than they had in months, their faces no longer carrying the weight of impossible decisions. "Officer Rodriguez, we can never thank you enough," Sarah said, giving him a hug that surprised him with its warmth. "If you hadn't stopped us that day, we would have made the biggest mistake of our lives." Emma nodded in agreement. "Selling Buddy wouldn't have solved anything. It would have just created new problems, but you helped us find real solutions." Michael looked around the room at the Chen family, now surrounded by new friends and supporters who had rallied to their cause. The financial crisis that had seemed insurmountable a month ago was now manageable, thanks to the generosity of their community. More importantly, the family was together and healing. "I didn't do much," Michael said honestly. "I just listened and tried to connect you with people who could really help." "You did more than that," Mr. Chen said, joining the conversation. "You saw past our daughter's mistake to understand their hearts. Many people would have just arrested them and walked away." Mrs. Chen nodded, her eyes bright with gratitude. "You gave us hope when we had almost given up. That's worth more than any amount of money." Michael felt a warmth in his chest that he hadn't experienced in years of police work. Too often, his job involved seeing people at their worst moments, dealing with problems that seemed to have no good solutions. This case had reminded him why he had become a police officer in the first place, to protect and serve his community, especially those who needed help the most. Danny suddenly reached out and grabbed Michael's hand with surprising strength. "Officer Rodriguez, Buddy wants you to know something important." "What's that, Danny?" The boy's eyes were serious and wise beyond his years. "He says that good things happen when good people choose to help instead of just doing their job. He says you're one of the good people." Michael felt tears prick at his eyes as he looked down at Buddy, who was watching the interaction with what seemed like approval in his intelligent golden eyes. The dog had indeed been the key to this entire story, not just as Danny's medical lifeline, but as the bridge that connected a struggling family to a caring community. As Michael prepared to leave the hospital that day, he reflected on how a routine call about suspected fraud had transformed into one of the most meaningful experiences of his career. He had learned that sometimes the best police work involved not making an arrest, but making a connection. The Chen family had taught him that love could drive people to desperate measures, but it could also inspire communities to extraordinary acts of kindness. And Buddy had shown him that the most important partnerships aren't always between humans. Sometimes they're between a boy and his dog, working together to overcome impossible odds. Walking to his patrol car, Michael smiled as he thought about his next shift. He would continue responding to calls, investigating crimes, and keeping his community safe. But now he would also remember to listen with his heart, just as a wise 16-year-old and his faithful golden retriever had taught him to do.